Welcome back to This Is a Commander channel, where this is a Commander channel, and today I'm going to talk about Commander Tough Rules and Cool Interactions, episode 70. Today's episode is going to take a look at one of the most popular commanders in the format as of right now. If we look at EDH Rec's top commanders overall in the last month, then he pops up at number 7, and he's currently at over 7,000 decks, which is impressive. The card is Jodah the Unifier, and he has a static ability that's not all that important to this episode, but he also has a triggered ability that we are very interested in. So let's take a look at what it says. Whenever you cast a legendary spell from your hand, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a legendary non-land card with lesser mana value. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. This is a very powerful effect, and I even used this Jodah to make my first 5-color commander deck, and I built it as a shrines deck with my goal to flip into as many shrines with his triggered ability. Well, in one of my games, I cast a 4-mana legendary creature, and eventually flipped a card until I got to Asika, God of the Tree, which is a legendary non-land card with a lesser mana value than the one that I had just cast from my hand to trigger Jodah. So that all meant that Jodah's triggered ability would be happy with Asika, so I then went to cast the backside of her card, which is the Prismatic Bridge, which is a legendary non-land card, but it has a mana value of 5, which is 1 higher than the 4 on the spell I originally cast from my hand to trigger Jodah's ability. My opponent questioned me as to why I was flipping the card around, and right now, some of you are probably typing in the comments to point out that I've gotten this wrong. You may have been typing something out along the lines of, well, Mr. This Is a Commander channel, you would have been correct a little while ago, but Wizards of the Coast have actually changed the rules on how Cascade works, and you can no longer do that. And if that is what you are typing, then yes, you would be partially correct. So before we get into that answer, let's first take a look at Cascade and see what it says. Here is Yidris Maelstrom Wielder, which has been a classic Cascade commander for some time, so let's first read what its reminder text says about Cascade. It reads, when you cast the spell, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card that costs less. You may cast it without paying its mana cost. Put the exiled cards on the bottom of your library in a random order. And if you pull up its Oracle text on Scryfall, that's even what it says there. So, what is the change that happened to Cascade that I mentioned earlier? Back when Kaldheim released, we got the card Valki, God of Lies, which is a legendary creature with a mana value of 2. But it is a modal double-faced card that has the backside of Tibalt, Cosmic Imposter, which is a legendary planeswalker with a mana value of 7. So it became so problematic with people cascading on spells with a mana value of just 3 so that they would be flipping to hit a 0, 1, or 2 mana value card, seeing Valki, and then resolving the cascade to hit his 7 mana value planeswalker side. It was just deemed to be too good. So we've gotten an updated rules on Cascade, and to know them, we must check the comprehensive rules. Under CR section 702.85a, we see that Cascade is a triggered ability that functions only while the spell with Cascade is on the stack. Cascade means, when you cast this spell, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card whose mana value is less than this spell's mana value. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost if the resulting spell's mana value is less than this spell's mana value. Then put all cards exiled this way that weren't cast on the bottom of your library in a random order. Okay, so now we've seen the rules for Cascade. How does that mean that Jodah's ability gets around this? Everyone just calls his ability Legendary Cascade, so what's the difference? What's the loophole? Let's read his ability again, and then I'm going to reread one specific section from Cascade's rules, and let's see if you can spot the difference. Whenever you cast a legendary spell from your hand, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a legendary non-land card with lesser mana value. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. And then the specific part from Cascade's rules is this line here. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost if the resulting spell's mana value is less than this spell's mana value. And yes, some of you may also have noticed that Cascade doesn't care about where the spell is cast from, although different ways you grant Cascade to spells may often add in their own requirements for this, but Cascade itself just cares that the spell has been cast to the stack. Jodah does specifically require it to be a spell cast from hand. But enough of that. What's the big difference here? So Cascade will check the mana value of the card twice. Once when it exiles to that card, and then again when you attempt to cast it as a spell. But when we read Jodah's ability, we can see it only checks the mana value of the card once, when it exiles it as a card. And then it lets you cast it as a spell with no further stipulations after that. So once you move the card to the stack to be a spell that's cast, you pick the mode or the side of it that is being cast. Stay tuned for another episode soon that will be covering a cool trick that you can do with Jodah's pseudo Cascade ability and also with other Cascades that not a lot of people know about. So keep an eye out for that episode. Anyhow, that's all I've got for today's episode. As always, I hope that all of you have found this video to be entertaining at least, and I hope that a few of you have even learned something about the crazy rules in this great game of Magic. Have a good one. Ta-ta!